difference in access to the technologies, knowledge of how things work, all the things. And I just knew we had this huge chasm of knowledge difference, and I felt that there was a need to educate. I think the reason I was capable of educating is because in college I did data science. I was headed down the PhD path. I decided a year and a half into that PhD research is not my thing. I'd like to go make it applied, So I started to pick up code. I thought I was going to build apps. It was, 2007. It was app for that everywhere. I thought I'm going to go build apps. I'm going to get data. I'm going to do research that way, and I'm going to make products that make the world better. And that's what I pursued. When I got to Google, I thought, wow, this is absolutely the best place I could ever be to do that work. I thought this is the collective conscious of the world. And in many ways, I still believe Google is that. It's what is everybody thinking at any given moment in time, pretty much, right? Around the whole world. So I thought it was super cool. I had a ton of fun. What concerned me was not just something at Google, it was across the industry at large at that time. I haven't gone data science to code, and then I didn't mention it, but I also did design later on because I saw the code automating the code, right? I was like, at some point, I need to just figure out how information works. And so I was sitting in UX research at the time and seeing how people were doing the research and asking the questions, and having been trained on data ethics and how to ask proper research questions and build that, I just saw a bunch of flaws in the work. And it was not malicious, right? That's the thing that concerned me, right? It was that these are people, at that time, UX was just like exploding, right? I think still today it's a pretty new to a lot of people. But at that time, you were having UX researchers get pushed into, or UX designers, sorry, get pushed into this research position for organizations who were global. They're doing research on developing nations. They're doing research on other parts of the world they don't understand. And they're not doing it in a way that was meant to harm, but they were absolutely creating harms, right? And there was no proper training on how do we get people forward. It was just like, these companies needed to fill roles before, so the ship didn't sink. They put people in the role, and then these things started to happen. And that's more why I walked away to speak out, right? To educate people about, hey, this is happening. We need to talk about it. A simple example I actually have in my book is a cut from Facebook Messenger at the time, and I actually haven't checked recently to see if it's changed, but when you'd hang up Facebook Messenger, when you take a phone call, it would ask a 5-star rating, which was, how did your phone call go? Right, pretty simple question. And the 5 stars were it was bad, fair, good, very good, and excellent. Can anyone in the audience tell me out of those 5 choices why that's problematic? Anybody? I'll say it one more time. Bad, fair, good, very good, and excellent. Right. Right. It's skewed, right? 4 out of the 5 are fair or better. So what does that mean? In that case, maybe that's not the worst thing in the world. It's Facebook Messenger. But if Mark Zuckerberg had to go to Congress and answer under oath, do people enjoy the Facebook Messenger experience? 4 out of 5 would likely say fair or better, right? It skews the data. It's not malicious. It's simply something they were doing to get their job done and felt was a good ambition, right? But in the big picture, that was the kind of things I was seeing. And I felt if that's a public thing, what is happening internally at all these organizations, right? So that's why I went to speak out, was I really just felt that it could be done better. We need to talk about it as a community. And I felt it was easier to do it outside of the enterprise rather than inside. We needed to move faster. Since then, I've written my book, Automating Humanity, which there's a bunch of copies coming here. I believe early next week they'll be here. I have a few signed here today. That book, again, that was to educate the public, right? Can I grab one?
Yeah.
So I'm a designer, right? And I'll show you a few, images, right? It's 230 pages of writing, but it's about 120 of actual reading. There's a lot of images, a lot of, artwork that's in there, a lot of concepts that helps take really abstract things, which is, these big technology companies, and paint it into something that you can understand as an average day consumer, right? And this book was meant to be a coffee table book, right? Because you can go read all the technical books you want, but the general public's not doing that. They're not going out to read technical manuals on how does this work and why am I getting addicted and things like that. They need a simplification. Thank you.
Yeah.
And when I got invited to go speak with the team at the Social Dilemma, that was the thing I brought to them. And I said, look, you can go make another Talking Heads documentary if you want to. There's a bunch of them. And they don't go very far because the public doesn't understand what you're saying. There's a whole different language. You know, if you wanted to touch people, really what we need to do, we need to touch their hearts, not their brains, you know, and you need to make a story. So they did that. They did it very well, I believe. You know, I showed them my book. I said, here's how I visualized it. Take this. And they made a story about how it impacts your family. Everybody can watch that movie and say, that's my little brother, or that's my mom. And that, you know, like, it's relatable. It's not just stats, right? And I think that's why it clicked. We made a movie that at that point in history, right? It's not we were the only one. It's not that we did it best. There's 5, 10 plus different documentaries you could point to that happened before that. We made it at the moment in time that the public was educated and aware enough to be curious, and we made it in a language that they could understand, and it converted. And that's what happened, right? Since then, I've helped advise antitrust cases on Facebook and Google. I've helped draft privacy law in a couple different states. I've helped draft frameworks with the World Economic Forum and other global organizations. I've been all around the world speaking hundreds and hundreds of times. I've been on national broadcasts, whatever it may be. What I said when I left, about 7 years ago now, is almost the same thing I'm saying today. The difference is I'm saying less than I was back then, and it's often simpler. We're still not to the full thing I was saying because the world, I don't think, is quite there technically. Now, with everyone here, we can speak a bit more technical today, and I appreciate that. But generally speaking, when we're educating outside of enterprise, it's not so easy. And so, yeah, my work spans a diverse range of opportunities. I'm very happy to help you guys like talk through privacy differently. The reason why I got into privacy, there's various reasons, but the core of it was, as a designer, we have what's called a HIG, Human Interface Guidelines, how you design for people. And when privacy laws started to come out, I started to read them because I was like, this is the core. This is the HIG for the rest of my life. You know, Google might have a design framework I use for the next 5, 10 years. Intuit may as well. These laws are going to shape those things. So we need to learn those things. And that's why I'm super excited you have the Privacy Ambassadors program. I'm super excited everybody's showing up today because privacy is not just a legal concept. It's a human relationship concept. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And what resonates for me and what I think a lot of the folks on my team, both on the technical side and the legal side, are always trying to do is to take all that legalese. Take all of the, if this, then that kind of, way of conversing about data and bring it in and make it resonate and be personal. I think a lot of my experience here at Intuit has really been founded in the way that we approach product design and trying to start from the essential problem of a customer. What is the pain point we're trying to solve for? How can we really, really get very targeted on that? I feel like that resonates. You'll all have to tell me if it's true, but I feel that resonates very much with the way we think about privacy and approaching privacy too. What kind of personal information is really required? What is essential to move the needle forward? And not with a blind eye to using data. I think, the nice thing about my understanding of your approach and your history and your career has been that it's not about not using data. It's not about not innovating. It's not about embracing new technologies. It's about being thoughtful when you do.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I think that's also why I've been in so many rooms helping draft law, setting frameworks, working with regulators. Often when you're in those rooms, there is the big tech lobbyists, and then there's the advocates who are just wildly like human-centered focused, and that's it. I'm very pro-business. I'm very pro-data use, but I'm pro-responsible data use, and so I can sit in the middle and hear both sides and help articulate something that is more reasonable, not just trying to tear down big tech for the sake of tearing it down, you know.
Is there a way when you're approaching organizations, when you're working with them, where I think we can say out loud that data is the key to commercial success, right? That is the world we live in, and I don't think we need to be blind to that, to the point we just made about being responsible with the way you use that data. How do you initiate conversations with people who are either too scared to really engage with the data because of all of the restrictions and the potential risks, or too eager to use the data and feeling as though, you know, we have to move, and we're going to care about things, but this is what we need to do now? And where do you find that balance in the middle?
It's a great question.
Thank you.
Where I start whenever I engage with somebody is trying to understand the purpose for their question, the purpose for their inquiry. Like at the core of it, why are we all here? Not only here today at this office, but why are you all here at Intuit? Why did you join this company? What was the purpose for that? And then secondarily, what's the purpose for this use? Why do you need this so fast? Why do you need to deploy it so far and wide? Like, what are the needs? Because ultimately, my belief is there's no necessarily like right or wrong so much as there is a spectrum of what's possible and what's not, and a timeline of how reasonable that is, right? The laws, right? Of course, we do have laws. I mentioned privacy is a human concept. I do believe that. But I believe it's a human concept that because we have not treated it well is now getting encoded in law, right? And so I like to abstract privacy away from law. We have to have the people in the room to teach about law, right? We have to have a backbone to our practices. But ultimately, everyone here is impacting privacy at Intuit. And, you know, simple things I've done that, like one thing is not fully developed yet, but I've tested in a few audiences, is I built this card game called Algorithms Against Humanity. And what this is I have, you know, one card that is, this is what you need to do with the data, and then a bunch of cards of either data points or data sets. And I do that, and without getting into the rules of the game, I do that because I think, like you mentioned, privacy's got so convoluted as I need to be a lawyer to talk about it, or I need to be an engineer to talk about it. When we have this simple game that says, hey, figure out how to target all people within a 100-mile radius in New York that wants to buy a Yankees jersey. And you just have these data sets of like their Spotify playlists and, you know, the beer they drank at the brewery nearby, like things like that. It abstracts it from me needing to know the language of code and law to, you know what? Actually, I understand where this comes from, and we do this every day, and I can be part of it. And I think that's the core of it. So to circle that, purpose. Why are we here at this job? What do you need it for today specifically? And have you really thought about the concepts you're trying to approach and how it impacts the people? That's how I frame it.
Yeah, I you know, in my career too, I think the other thing that helps a lot is sort of vision for the company. And knowing what you're marching toward and what you're aiming for. Here in our language, we have big bets. We have, you know, bold goals that we plan out, and over a successive multi-year period, this is what we're marching toward, and we keep coming back and checking against that and making sure that our activities still align with that, or that those goals still resonate, that they're still meaningful, that they match up with what it is our customers want, what they expect. And I have found, particularly here, that framework very helpful in having those kind of conversations, because the truth is there are a million different great ideas.
Yeah.
There's so many possibilities that all this data and all of this technology bring to the table. We could do anything. Why are we doing it? What is the purpose? Why should we spend time and energy? Because the other thing we don't have, you know, unlimited resources is people and time and money and all of those things that keep the lights on and allow us to function as a company. And so how do you prioritize? How do you, you know, think about that? From my perspective, there's a lot of work that we do within the organization to talk about finding an easy way, a consistent way to show up, making things in very plain English. You know, there's a lot of activity going on internally at Intuit. Even now, we happen to be in February, February will now be branded Privacy Awareness Month for everyone. Please take your corporate compliance training. I would appreciate it. Little personal plea that launches today. But it's moments like that. It's the resources that the team puts out.
Yeah.
And then really trying to pressure test to see, was that easy to use? Are we making it easy to work with our team? Do you understand why we're sitting in this room? What's the basis for this conversation as opposed to maybe a more nuanced conversation about a feature enablement that wouldn't necessarily on its surface bring to the table a privacy conversation?
Yeah. Yeah, and to that point, I think where privacy often gets lost in organizations is the frame of compliance burden rather than value addition. I don't think we've reached the point at which we consider privacy as value add. And I think we're getting there, right? I think, you're doing the work.
I'm trying.
I know Barbara's doing, I've worked with Barbara a lot, I talked to Barbara a lot, I know Barbara's doing the work. Like, there's a lot of people here that are pushing on us and have been pushing on it for many years. But it's educating the wider public and the wider public within your org, right? Helping them understand why this is a value add. Research shows if you treat people's data with respect and you get them to consent properly and they understand these things, they'll actually give you a wider breadth and deeper knowledge of themselves, right? They won't pull back. Why did people pull back when Apple gave rights to shut down access to their location, all these other things a couple years ago? Why did they pull back from Facebook and Twitter and but not Apple, right? Apple was promoting privacy. Now, whether they're doing that or not, we can talk about that afterwards.
That's another talk.
Okay, but they got people to believe in it, right? At the minimum, and that's the double-edged sword of that research, right? It is a paradox that you, as the people sitting in this room, have to honor. Otherwise, it becomes weaponized, and then people don't trust even more. But here's the core I want everybody here to consider, right? And I have a talk about this to go in more detail, but data is money, point blank, period, right? You're into it, okay? You're all somewhat in finance. If your CFO said to you, yeah, we have money come in and out, but I don't really know where. I don't know how we're organizing it, but it's coming in and out.
Right.
Would you just be in shock? Would you not? Right? Like, the data is your money. And if you don't treat it right, the data is the trust from your customers, right? We got to consider it differently today than we did 5 or 10 years ago. This is the moment to lock in and to make this something that separates your company from the organizations who are going to continue abusing it. Because if that data is not given to you, it gets old and stagnant, right? Something I think is like about 30% of data turns over a year, something about that amount, okay? If that continues and they pull out, or there's plenty of apps nowadays. I use an app called Cloaked. I get anonymous IDs everywhere I go in, and I have a masked email address, a masked phone number. If you get a bunch of fake information, if consumers start to go down that path at large, your data's worth zero, right? The reason it's worth something is because you can connect that email from, we're sitting in here, MailChimp to TurboTax. You can connect these details and create profiles and help them add value to their lives through integration of data. If you can't connect the dots, you're just sitting with siloed databases of random information that actually provides you and them zero value, right? So, trust is a soft concept. It's not one I'm going to try to define in economic terms today, but I just want you to think about that because people are aware. That's, like I said, that is why I think the social dilemma was successful. It was not us. We didn't do anything that special. It was a moment in history, and it validated people are scared. They want to trust you, but they can't. So who's going to step up?
Yeah, and I think, it is trust. And in a way, it sounds very easy for us to sit up here and say, oh, say what you're going to do and then do that and don't do anything else. And of course, that's what we do. That's how we show up with our customers. To do this very well, I want to give a credit to the sort of behemoth that is the infrastructure all along the way. And, we sometimes forget, as a relatively speaking, I guess I'll call it a middle-aged company. I don't know if we're 41 years old, right? Yeah. And the amount of transition that has happened in our customer base, in the opportunity to collect and generate data, in the technology that has run parallel, and trying to always look at what's the next thing coming down the road. What's the next technology that's going to add value to our customer's life? Not just for the sake of plugging in the latest technology, but like what's the thing that is going to differentiate us? And then taking that extra step back. What are the organizational resources we have to have in place to do it and do it very well, to do it quickly, right? To be there in the market and feel confident in what we're releasing out into the world. And then how do we do it responsibly? We had a very big announcement about 6 months ago, I guess, September timeframe, about our new generative AI product, Intuit Assist. And right parallel with that was a big conversation publicly about responsible use of AI. AI is a great example in my mind where, like, at the moment, the law is not coming in to save the day. It is very murky. It is very fragmented. People are looking at different emerging regulations. There's no roadmap for how to do this. But it is a technology that has a lot of value. It is going to propel a lot of amazing business initiatives. And so as an organization coming together and saying, look, in the absence of the perfect roadmap from a law, this is what we stand for. And when we're devising our products and services, we're going to be as transparent as we can be. We're going to keep safety and privacy in mind. We're going to be thoughtful. We're going to consider it through the lens of the consumer. And it doesn't have the weight and effect of a law, but at least we can say, look, this is how we're choosing to do things. And I see more and more companies trying to move in that direction. It's very easy to post something online. It is very difficult to mean it and be able to stand behind it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we spoke about this a little bit beforehand, but ethics is kind of where we're getting into this. Again, a soft area. It's very hard, right? And that is, I think, a core privacy too. Is privacy is individualized. No matter what the law says, everybody you talk to is going to have a different understanding of it. It's not security, right? Security is a technical black and white, not totally black and white, but compared to privacy, right? It's a checkbox. It's a do these things, make sure it works, and it's all compliant, right? Privacy is not as much. Privacy is more human factors, and it changes across cultures. It changes across genders. It changes across time periods. What's private today, maybe not 5 years from now. We don't really know how to predict it. And I think the core of that, what you're getting at there is everybody here is going to try their hardest. Just understand mistakes will be made. It doesn't mean you're evil. It doesn't mean you're bad. You're trying your hardest. And a consumer's not going to run away with one faux pas. They're going to run away when it happens time and time again, when it's empirically validated that what you're doing is incorrect and harmful, right? What we're seeing at Facebook, right? Just time and time again, there's research saying, hey, you're harming the kids. You're harming the kids. We told you you're harming the kids. You're harming the kids. You don't change, right? That's when people start to get concerned. You can make mistakes and make up for it if you just continue to try to get better every time. And I think that's what's so important about, you have your records of processing activity. You know where your data is. You have it all mapped, how it's allowed to be used. You're communicating that across your team. You have the documentation order, so if you do have problems, you know why you made those decisions, and you can look back and have a procedure as to how to correct and rectify it, right? There's all these things that you can do, but you're only humans, and this is an operation that's continually evolving, and that's good. And when you have something that comes up, a hurdle, admit it, work with your customer to fix it, and then make it something that goes across the industry, or the enterprise, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think the cultural component, in my experience, also is really important. That you have to have an environment where people know that leadership has their back, and that if they do make a mistake, spot something, or they can raise their hand, they can come forward and say, "Look, I'm struggling with this. This is what I need help with." And I feel like if you can't show up like that for your workforce, then you end up with, I'm going to fix this on the side, or, and the kind of behavior that you don't want to promote. And so there's a lot of attention on creating an environment where, we have one of many phrases I learned as I take my career here at Intuit. There's always this, like when we're making decisions and deciding whether to take a risk and trying to quantify the size of that risk, the phrase is, is this a one-way door, or is this a two-way door? Are you going to make a decision that we just cannot come back from, and so this better be the perfect decision? Or is this something where, okay, I can't say yes to this big ambitious thing today, but I bet I
Mm.
can say yes to this smaller way where we can test something out in a controlled environment and get you some information and you can grow from that. And
Yeah.
we can make decisions and come back and forth and have that dialogue.
Mhm.
And I see a lot of people being very intentional about that in the organization, showing up to meetings and be like, well, what kind of decision are we making here? And what is this? And what's at stake? And what I've liked a lot is the dialogue and the debate. To
Yeah.
me, having that conversation where there are genuinely opposing viewpoints on the topic and being able to have that moment where you're like, this is my perspective, this is your perspective. Are
Mhm.
we going to meet in the middle? Are we going to bring leadership in? And having that kind of culture too, I think is
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah, yeah, and it's got to be a top-down thing
Yeah.
too, right? It can't be something where you have grassroots people who are trying to push up all the time and don't have support from the top.
Yeah.
You know, so it's inspiring to me to see so many leaders in this room, top and down. Like sometimes you have a lot of advocates on the lower levels with new things, and they want to do better, they want to aspirationally, and the business is not ready for that, right? That's tough in this environment. We're seeing, to give you a concept on, fine amounts and volumes, and not to talk about and scare compliance, but like, the volume of fines on GDPR alone in 2018 was $500,000. Okay, it was the first law that really comprehensively came out and said we're going to strike some of this stuff down. People didn't know how to enforce it. They didn't know what they're looking at, and that was also, I think, early days of the executives were like, well, do we really need to care, right? I think that's changed a lot, and in part that is enforcement actions, in part that is consumers becoming more aware. But I think what the next step is having you all here turning into ambassadors, speaking about it far and wide in the organization, and resonating even harder up into the C-suite to say, this is a priority to us as the people who work for you, because it's more than just fines to us. It's a business value. It's a thing that we're going to install into our organization so we keep having people come back. And those customers who've been with us for 20 years, they're going to be with us for 30 years. Like that's what you guys really need to come into, is not just about fines, not just about compliance, but the bigger purpose and how this adds value to driving that purpose.
Yeah, I think, it's an interesting take because I think particularly within the legal team, even outside of privacy, we talk a lot about, yes, there's always a consequence to not doing exactly what's going on with the letter of the law. Like that's the point of the law. But there can often be business efficiencies,
Yeah.
future scalability, like a true business upside to being thoughtful, being organized, and marshalizing people to spend a little bit more time to do X, fill in the blank with making sure the data map is up to date and current, or
Yeah.
following sort of connectivity and double checking against the UX that we put out into the world and the different kinds of disclosures to make sure that we're showing up the way we want to and we say we're going to.
Yeah.
And that's again, that's another conversation too, because there's only so many resources to go around. There's only so much time. But in trying to instill that in the culture and say, this is why we're doing this here. And if we have this conversation now, we probably won't have to have it again for a while because we will have the infrastructure in place.
Yeah, and think about from we're talking infrastructure documentation here. How many times have you had to go back and forth between legal because you're trying to get approvals on stuff and this knowledge is siloed in legal, right? Or it's siloed in compliance, whatever it may be here into it. If you can abstract that out, if you have the proper documentation to say, hey, CMO, here's what we're doing, here's what you're allowed to do with it, they don't have to go back and forth as much. It's time to innovation, right? It's like, how can you reduce that and make it so you're innovating more rather than trying to circle back on how to comply. Have it done well, get the people involved that need to be involved, and then educate far and wide, because it's going to make your machine move faster.
I want to make sure that I also mention we do have the chat open if those of you are in other locations or on Zoom and you want to ask questions. I want to make sure we have time for questions in the room. We have 5 minutes?
5 minutes till questions.
Okay, 5 minutes till questions. Okay, I'm looking genuinely at 3 different clock times, so I just want to make sure I'm following the right one. I was like, what time is it? But making sure that folks have the opportunity to engage, because we can go all day, as you can see. So let me pause for a minute if there are any questions in the room. Anything? Oh, Rainbow. Oh, like a real one. Hey. See, is it? I planned that. There we go. No, no, no.
I have a mic
It's Privacy
here.
Day.
Any questions? Anyone?
Okay. But don't be shy. If you do, we've got a mic up front here. One of the things that as someone who had watched the movie, I had two immediate thoughts. One is, I am so glad that this is probably one of the few times in my life I'm like that I'm older.
Yeah.
Like, my high school experience was wildly different. And we had to, call from the phone that was connected to the wall in the kitchen. There was no ability to chat about me, discuss about me, other than notes and now it sounds like I went to school in the 1800s, but that is not the case. And it wasn't that long ago, but it was a very different experience. And I think about that in terms of, I have a niece and a nephew who had to kind of grow up in this age. I've got really close friends with children. We saw this week, the major social outlets having to go and talk to Congress about this. Children's data is something that's super top of mind. Again, because we have this technology and we have a lot of capacity, and it's not widely understood. And so, I was watching the movie thinking, how do you come away from this movie as, a parent or someone with a child in your life and not just take away the phone forever and say, sorry, you can't do it. Like, how can you introduce that conversation in home to help kids start to understand this? Because they're only going to grow up in this environment even more.
Yeah, that's probably like some of the core of why I'm in privacy, to be honest with you. I was bullied a lot in high school. You can't tell now because I grew up, I got in shape and stuff, but I was like the fattest kid in high school. I was the shortest kid in the room. I'm still pretty close to that one. But it was not a great high school experience for me. But I could go home and shut my door and lock my door and get my space, right? Kids today cannot, right? When the social dilemma first came out, I remember we were speaking at a school in Utah after Sundance. There was 2,000 kids there, something like that. From the top rafters, there was a kid got a mic, started crying about how bullied they'd been and how they can't get away from it. And I told my story and I said, you know what, that's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing this. Privacy is more than just not seeing the ads you don't want to see. Privacy is the bullying aspect, having the right to shut it down and not be targeted all the time. How many times have you been in a bad mood or you had some emotion and all of a sudden your social media feed looks like it understands that you're in that mood and it's going to make it worse, right? Like, that's how the algorithms work, right? It's more than that. It's being able to get into college and not be discriminated because your application doesn't fit what the algorithm thinks is correct. It's being able to go on a bike ride and not getting arrested because location data was subpoenaed and you happen to fit a profile. There's so many things to privacy. You guys are working with finance data. It's not GPS like Google, but it might as well be. You can see where I am. You can see where I buy things. You can see who I interact with. Like, there's a lot of information in finance data. It's more than just complying with the law for me. I've had that problem. Like, my mom also was harassed a lot when I was a kid. 9 to 12 years old, she fought a long court case trying to get protections. I grew up in a house where the blinds were closed all the time, and we checked in the car before we got in. It's like, that's privacy. That's the ability to feel safe in your own environment. And, I always talk about privacy as a human factors thing. That's why I'm in it. Because for me, privacy is not just a data thing. If we have complete surveillance all the time, people don't get their space. And if people don't get their space, they can be tracked down at any time, right? My parents are in automotive now. They moved on from that job where they were both working when they met. And the thing that we're now seeing in automotive is cars are getting parts. They're getting taken apart into parts and sold, put together somewhere else. And guess what? The data from that person's profile in their car, they plug their phone and they attach it. There's contact lists, there's GPS locations, there's all these things where they've been. And their partners, ex-partners can go find that information and hunt them down. This is data to you. These are dots on a map to people working with GIS and GPS. It's much more than that, though, consider the human factors that you're impacting as you're designing with data, as you're combining it across platforms, and realizing the law, I believe the law is put into place because people were too callous for too long. We didn't have a law for so long because we either didn't know about it or it wasn't harming people to where we understood how. We do today. Hold yourselves accountable, hold your colleagues accountable, make it something that's beyond finance because you can have that impact. Yeah.
Thank you.
This is super interesting stuff. I have a question because I'm probably more like Elise in terms of, when I grew up, no cell phones. Yeah. But we're coming at it from that perspective. Like I have 9 nieces and nephews who've always grown up with cell phones and social media.
Yeah.
And they are okay filming themselves getting fired, right? So they're okay sharing everything about their life, where they are, who they're talking to, the way they're feeling. Back in the day, I would have been loath to share the fact that I had been fired from a job or terminated, but people are now recording it and posting it. So that there's these different views of privacy. So I find that fascinating as well. I don't know how we manage that because some people are just feel free to about giving up everything, it seems.
Yeah.
But then how do companies manage and deal with the fact that there's people with this mindset who will film themselves getting terminated or potentially sensitive information about their company and putting it out there for all the world to see. I mean, there seems to be a lot of impacts and maybe it's good because then people are like, well, we need to make sure that we're doing right by the employee and not, So, I mean, there's a lot of things in that. And I don't even know if that was a question.
Yeah. No, I mean,
think
that's, again, privacy is emotional. Privacy is not just a checkbox. Well, from that perspective, I mean, let's start with like the kids and the protections. I'm a big advocate, and I've been a big advocate, and people think I'm loony for saying it, but I think kids should not have a smartphone until they're like 16 or 18, one of the two, something like you can still have a phone that you can call 911, you can call for a ride, all the things. You don't have to have all the candy apps, all the things that get you hooked. I think let's stop trying to make algorithms that predict if this is a child or not, and let's just not give them phones like we don't give them cigarettes, right? Don't think there's a harm in that. I've talked to too many parents who try to make a change, and the reason they can't is because the neighbors won't, right? Or their kids' friends won't, right? And that's a problem. The government needs to step in and be the bad guy so that parents can get back to being parents and having fun with their kids and not being the police. I think that's it. So in terms of the job stuff, I mean, it's hard to balance that because sometimes those employees are correct and sometimes they're just trying to get a new job. Right? Like that's the root, right? Same with I deal with reviews for my parents' company. Sometimes I've been helping out for the last half decade, helping them grow their business. And you get some people who just think the internet's meant to shame until you get a discount. And even when you give them a discount, they just keep shaming. And it's the same thing with this employee thing, right? It's like they want something, they're not getting it. The way I approach it, and maybe it's not right for everybody, but the way I approach it is always not on social media. It is to email or call them, to make sure it's in a private conversation, to listen and hear them, right? Number one, I think empathy is lost a lot when we're upset, when both sides are angry. To hear them and let them vent their pains and to recognize that they are correct in having an emotion. It's not their fault to have an emotion, but that maybe that was the inappropriate way to display the emotion. And there's better ways to have the conversation, right? You can't fix everybody, but as a company, I think the only way you can respond is to have empathy and to rectify as much as you can, But you do have to cut ties at some point too, and sometimes it's just not the right person, and especially if they treat you that way and they deserve to get let go. Like some people, you just can't stop them, right? I don't know.
You know,
I don't know if that answered anything.
yeah, one interesting thing I want to pick up on that you mentioned is something I think a lot about too, because when we're talking about bringing all the people to the table to design whatever it is and using whatever technology we have and whatever data we have to build something out, we talk a lot about having a good diverse team, having those perspectives there. If I was the only person who was weighing in on data use, I might come in and say, I don't understand. Who would ever want this information revealed? I, keep myself, completely private, and I don't live online, and I don't do this. The reality is there's an entire generation that does. And so, it's a balancing act constantly when you're having design conversations, when you're thinking about use, when you're thinking about risk, to a little bit check yourself and just remind yourself, okay, well, that's your perspective. Does that resonate? Sometimes, right is right and wrong is wrong. I think those are a little bit more clear cut. But when we're trying to ideate and innovate and create the products of the future, you have to think about the generation you're trying to reach and the audience you're trying to reach without sacrificing all of the loyal customers that have brought you to this point in time. And so I think it's a very real balancing act. But to me, the way you navigate that is trying to get as much perspective as possible. Making sure you have that diversity of thought and composition across the team, because we all have our own perspective of what is the correct way to go about doing things in terms especially of like how much you would or could reveal about yourself. Like, hand to God, if I ever thought in my lifetime that I would take pictures of my dessert and then put it out there, but I do. But I never thought I would be that girl. I'm that girl, apparently. Like it happens and things evolve over time. Perspectives change. And so trying to hold those perspectives and give room for people to have them and bring them to the table, I think is actually really critical.
Can I also add to that, like, have some limits and controls and constraints put in place too, right? Like, as a leader, I've found especially as I've gotten older, I'm not always right. Right. And sometimes people know better. And I think if you do things as a leader that makes you uncomfortable, you set a limit. You say, hey, I'm going to trust that this one. We're going to try it. Here's the point at which we're going to pull back if it doesn't work. Right. Like, I definitely don't believe in like just absolutism. Like, let's talk about it. Let's come to a cooperative agreement as to what is success or failure. And then if it fails, we pull back. If it succeeds, well, hey, great work, pat him on the back. Another one back.
I think we've got another question in the room, but feel free to keep dropping them in the Zoom chat or in the Ambassador Slack channel.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here, by the way. I find listening to you is interesting, but I actually have a question for you, a two-part question. One is, have you ever seen Minority Report or Back to the Future? And when you watched them back then, what did you think about the personalized advertising that was in them? Remember when he got his eyeballs changed? And then two, from a culture standpoint and a safety standpoint, where do you draw the line, right? Because I have a daughter who's 18, and I don't track her location, but her mother does. I'm against it, but her mother is not. But if anything ever happened to my daughter, I would absolutely want to know where she is, right? Or where her phone is or whatever, right?
Yeah, and you probably feel really guilty if something did happen and you didn't track her, right? Like, there's this binary of like, do I or do not? Yeah. I'll start with the sci-fi stuff. I haven't. I've seen Back to the Future. I haven't actually seen Minority Report. I haven't seen a lot of sci-fi films, and people tell me I should write a sci-fi film, and I'm like, I don't even watch sci-fi. Like, I've seen some Star Wars. I haven't seen any Star Trek. Like, but I did see one everybody should watch, I think, is The Creator. I just watched it on a flight here. And that, oh man, that was wild. I had some emotions on that one. And it was about life with robots. And I was like, I can't believe I have emotions about robots. But anyway, you should watch it. On the kids' side, that's another one where I think it's between you and your wife, right? Like, my partner, also, we don't have kids yet, but I know she's gonna want to be that mom too. I already know she's the tiger mom. But yeah, it's a tough balance, and I think it's between you and your partner to figure out like what makes it most comfortable. I don't think it's wrong to track your child if you have it within reason, right? Like you're doing it for a safety purpose. You're not tracking them when. I think it becomes wrong when they go to a movie and then the kid is maybe they skirt the movie and they go do something else during the movie. They will do, right? They will do. And you're tracking them and you're calling them, say, hey, I see you're not in the movie, right? Something like that. But you know, to know where they are and to have it in your back pocket, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. And perhaps communicate to them, right? Communicate to them that, hey, we're doing this, we're watching it, we're not going to stare at you for the couple hours that you're gone or whatever it may be. I don't know what's going on. We're back. Is that me?
Is it your mic?
I'll hold this out here. Maybe it's rough on my shirt. But
No, come on.
yeah, that's usually what it is.
There we go.
Isn't it? There you go.
Thank you.
But yeah, so I think it's a big balance, and it's really just the constraints you put on it that you and your wife come to, and we don't. I can hold it. It's okay.
That's okay.
I'm sure this is going out. This is probably also because it's going out to the non-local people. Is that right?
Maybe.
Because I could speak loud enough too if I need to without them. Okay, cool. Okay. Okay, no worries. Yeah, so circle back on that. I think it's constraints. It's you and your wife coming to agreement with like what's best for your family, communicating with your child on what those constraints are. Just like I think all of it's just good relationship habits, really. I think what we're actually going through right now is an evolution of like emotional intelligence, because for so long we didn't have the ability to have this much knowledge. We didn't, and this is not about kids, but like I've always mirrored all the things we're seeing in life, these fights for equal rights, the not wanting to go into war and different things that we've been talking about. The Vietnam War in the U.S. was the first that was recorded, and that was the first time U.S. citizens said, we don't like war, right? Sometimes we don't know things are happening until we see them, or we don't want to believe that they're happening until we see them, right? All the Me Too movement, right? That was a thing that women didn't get believed for decades, centuries, right? And then we could see it, and now things are changing. So I think it's really us coming to as a society and recognizing and reconciling things that we've put on the back burner for so long because we either didn't believe it or didn't want to believe it. And then when it comes to like your personal life and how to apply it, I really think it comes into having conversations with your wife, with your kids, with everybody involved, and setting appropriate boundaries. And again, having qualifiers of when does it go past the boundary? When do we feel as a family is going past the boundary? And of course, your children are your children, so they're going to have mom and pop say, we don't want you looking at me. So you guys, you're the parents, but like, yeah, include your kids too. Make them feel at least that you've listened and heard them, right? I think that's the number one. If you just force it on them, you can do it. You're the parents, but they probably are not gonna
They'll find a way.
comply as much, right? Like,
Can I jump in there with a question from the chat, which is kind of related?
Yeah.
Someone's asking here, any recommendations for resources that can be used to help educate aging generations?
Yeah.
So we're talking about kids a
Oh.
lot, right? And they might have a different sense of privacy. How about our elders?
educate them about privacy specifically, or what? Because technology is very broad.
Let's say privacy.
Yeah.
Let's say
Okay.
privacy, since we're here as the
Um,
privacy ambassadors of Intuit.
Yeah, that's a good question.
While you're thinking about it. So it's a very
Yeah.
real thing. I have got
Yeah.
an elderly aunt. She lives alone in New Hampshire. Hey, Aunt Jan. She got a phone call from, lo and behold, the IRS. And the IRS wanted all this information, and it sounded very official. And they actually, so you feel comfortable, let us direct you to this website so you can validate we are who we are. And it was so far beyond her imagination that anyone would put the time and energy into creating a fake website, to finding her, to knowing enough about her to make a reasonably informed call. And it was, 10 minutes later, she had already, oh yeah, do you need my routing number for my bank account and everything, you know, and that kind of stuff happens all the time. And to the point, I think
Yeah.
the question that person who's asking is generationally, again, there's a perspective of, why would anyone even do that? Of course, this must be legitimate, but then also the capabilities of the technology and all. So we actually talk a lot about it. Probably my family's a little sick of it, but like that's a holiday conversation. Like, are you seeing things? Do you know? And they're like, yes, we know. You have to look at the header and make sure it's a real address. But like, I think if you don't have those conversations, you know, that's how people learn. It's at least through dialogue.
I think that's a great example. See, my brain went straight to, oh yeah, you know what? I wish I could stop my dad from voice texting me. But
Well,
that's not the
that's a
privacy we're
personal
talking
problem.
about.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. No, but yeah, on that side, definitely.
Yeah.
I've also working with my parents. I have to teach them like, hey, look at the email address, not just who it's from, and it's something like Intuit. Like, does it look like a long scrambled link? Is it make it look like it's kind of random and it's not actually that? Like, I had to teach them how do you test if a domain is real?
Yeah.
Right. Like, I had to make them highlight it, go copy and put it in a browser and see like, oh, this is not even a real thing. But they're getting so advanced nowadays, and you know, combine that with LLMs, and it does sound like there's another human on the other side. It can be put into my voice for all I know, right? Like, I don't know the answer to that one, to be honest with you. I'm still kind of learning that side. I do have a friend who created a service called Generation Exchange, and what they're doing is basically that. It's data literacy, digital literacy, having college kids volunteer to work with older clients who need help setting up their technologies, learning about these things. I think there's a huge business in it as well, in education. But yeah, they're definitely getting taken advantage of in ways they probably never would have ever imagined, and definitely can't conceptualize.
Well, I think we're rounding out on our time together. Thank you very, very much, Joe. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I hope the audience has here. Please don't let this be the last of the conversation. Remember, Privacy Day is a point in time on the calendar, but it's also all year long. We've got a ton of really exciting resources that we have available that we're going to be continuing to push out from the Intuit privacy program. We have a newly refreshed hub on Insight. So go check it out. There's a knowledge library. We're going to be adding collateral there. And we do have the ambassadors program. Nada's here. We have representatives at all the different sites. So if you want to sign up and learn more about that program.
Can I do
we
one
welcome
small
it.
plug for that?
Yes,
If you
please.
enjoyed the talk with Joe, we do have copies of his book available.
Yeah.
Join the channel Community Privacy Ambassadors. We'll get your address and we'll ship you a book. And then I promise you we'll delete the address. Or we'll have it shipped to your
That's
office
right.
cube.
You
If
can
you don't want to
trust
give
us.
us your home address, that's totally fine. We care about your privacy. And for those in the room here, sorry for everyone else, we have a few signed copies of Joe's book. So if you want to come grab one, I've got 3 of those. But otherwise, we will ship you one because we've got plenty.
Battle Royale.
There you go. Exactly.
I also want to say thank you all for having me. I really enjoy having company engagements and speaking with people who are practicing this rather than just being a keynote. It's great. If you need help with anything, I'm also available. You know, I mostly you're going to find me on LinkedIn. I do have social media profiles. I don't respond to most of them. But LinkedIn, you can find me there. Email is joe@datagrade.com. I'm constantly working on new innovations for privacy. If you need help with anything, please do reach out. I'm happy to help make a better, more privacy-respecting internet.
All right. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. Stick around for the movie as well, everyone. If you want to watch The Social Dilemma and you didn't get to join us for the first showing, we'll be screening it again in 15 minutes.
There's something big in this room, and it isn't me and it's not you. Works away at my bones, grinds me down, grinds me down. But there's a window in here I can open up and fall through. stretching out.